a self-confessed Islamic extremist who once thought about planning a terrorist attack on this country now admits part of what took him to the brink of mass murder was repressed homosexuality. Sohail Ahmed scouted possible occasions to set off a bomb in the heart of London. As a teenager, he preached his inflammatory message in a sixth form college. He encouraged other British-born Muslims to fight against the West in the Holy War. But he's changed tack now. He works against extremism. He's studying physics, and he says it's clear to him that repressing his true sexuality was one reason why he was ready to become a jihadi. So he's sitting opposite me now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So take us back if you can. And what was it that made you gravitate towards extreme views?
Well, the thing is, to be honest, I was born into a radical form of Islam, Islamism, specifically Salafi, Wahhabi form of Islam. And it was something I was born into, and then later I actually started studying myself, and I then became further radicalised. And from then on, it was just basically a trajectory downwards.
So it was your parents, was it? They were teaching you to believe in extreme things.
Oh yes, entirely. Initially, it was my parents teaching me this stuff. You stone people to death. You throw gay people off tall buildings and stone them to death. Things like that. But then, interestingly, after a while, it was kind of me who began teaching them, because I kind of took over their kind of teaching role, and I started studying it myself.
So you were about, 15, 16 or so, were you, when you were going to the mosque yourself?
Well, I was going to the mosque since the age of 6, so yeah.
But when you started to become almost extremist off your own bat?
Off my own bat, it really began at the age of around, I'd say, 12, 13.
Really early?
Yeah, very early, very early.
And so what kind of thoughts were in your head then?
Well, I mean, since being a child, I was brought up believing that I was taught that the United Kingdom is at war with Islam, that the West is evil, that all non-Muslims, the kuffar, are enemies, and that one day it will be our duty to rise up and fight jihad against all non-Muslims in the West, and to basically take over the world, impose Sharia, and then there'd be what we would see as a kind of like a utopia kind of state.
And do you remember your parents' reaction when 9/11 happened?
Yes, I do remember my parents' reaction, but I don't want to kind of single out their reaction. I want to kind of talk about generally the kind of Muslims or the kind of Islam, the ideology that I was brought up in.
Well, tell us about your reaction then.
Well, my reaction was actually, it's extremely, I feel terrible saying this and I feel extremely guilty, but it was very positive. I was happy. Disgustingly, I was very happy.
Celebrated with friends, or
yeah, it was yeah, I celebrated it, and the same thing also in 7/7 happened. It's difficult for me to kind of admit this, but that was the case.
And you took on a kind of teaching role as your teenage years went on, did you?
Yes, that's correct. I started, because I started studying Islam, kind of, or the form of Islam that I was brought up in, the Islamism, myself, because I was interested in it. So I started studying it a lot, and it got to a stage where I actually knew more about Islam, or that form of Islam, than kind of the rest of my friends. So in fact, I was the kind of like the center point. People would come to me to, when they had questions about Islam, or if they had doubts about Islam, I would be the one who would alleviate their doubts, that kind of thing. So it was pretty much like a preaching role. And at one point, I was actually an imam at my local mosque.
Right. And it feels odd to throw in a question about your sexuality, but were you at the age of 12, 13, 14, 15 aware that you were attracted to boys, to men?
I was aware of that since the age of 7, 8.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you know that you were gay, or did you not really confront that?
Well, the thing is, I didn't know that I was gay. Strangely, it might sound strange, but let me explain. It's because my religion taught me that there's no such thing as being gay. God doesn't create gay people. Everyone's straight. If someone does engage in, quote unquote homosexual activity, it's only because they're possessed, because they've been perverted, or because they're mentally ill. So because of that,
and they die as a result of that, is that
right? Yes, entirely. So because of that, I didn't accept myself as gay, because I didn't believe gay people existed. And I only actually came out to myself and realized I was gay last year.
Okay, so you're now early 20s, so that's quite a gap, isn't it? But as you were exploring your terrorist ideology, you actually decided you could do some physical damage. Is that right?
That is entirely correct. It's because basically my parents did not teach me violent extremism. They didn't teach me violent Islamism, but they did teach me non-violent extremism. And whenever people kind of children end up going to kind of join ISIS and stuff. It's a lot of the times the parents say, oh, it's got nothing to do with us. We had nothing to do with it. But it's kind of like, you know, they will bring their children right up to the threshold of violent extremism through non-violent extremism, but right up to the threshold. And then for the individual, the child themselves, it's only a couple of steps to cross that line.
Oh, and how old were you when you started thinking you could plant a bomb?
That was around the age of 16.
And what did you do?
I looked out for places where I could plant a bomb, somewhere where it wouldn't rouse suspicion, somewhere where I could plant a package that I could then detonate at a distance. But beyond that, it didn't get beyond that.
And where did you go to find your place?
Well, I kind of looked around central London, and I was kind of eyeing Canary Wharf specifically.
So attacking a bank maybe, or something like that?
A high-profile building, something that would kind of maximize effect in terms of, in terms of seeding terror.
And you found a place, did you?
I didn't find a specific place, but it was just kind of like a general kind of plan.
So you're a 16-year-old looking around for a place to plant a bomb. Did you, and you're an intelligent guy, I can tell, did you at some point think this is actually really mad?
Yes, entirely. I mean, right from the beginning, I'd always had doubts about the form of Islam that I believed in. Was it right to kind of wage jihad and to take over the world? Was it right to kind of kill someone because they disagreed with you on religion, or because they criticized your religion? These doubts always surfaced up. But it was the fear of hell, of disagreeing with God, and then going to hell and burning forever, that kind of drove me on. And I became increasingly radicalized because of these doubts. Because I wanted to get rid of these doubts, and in order to get rid of the doubts, I kind of went deeper and deeper into my ideology. And from my experience of talking to other Islamists that agreed with me, it's very similar to theirs. I'm telling you right now, the vast majority of Islamists, the vast majority of jihadists, they all have doubts, all of them.
Do you think quite a lot of them are repressing their sexuality?
In my experience, if let's just say, for argument's sake, 3% of the general population is gay, I'd argue that actually, if you look at radical Islamism, at least 6% of them would be gay, double the amount. And I mean, from my own experiences, it's a large number of them do kind of seem to be kind of repressing their sexuality, and the reason for that is why did they become radical? It's because the Islamic scholars in Saudi Arabia, what they say is, and generally everywhere, what they say is that if you are experiencing homosexual urges, one of the cures to that is to get closer to the religion of Allah, to get closer to Islam, and to practice it more. So it's basically, if you're basically brought up in this kind of radical ideology, you'll become even more radical, or you might even get introduced to it.
So you're almost running away from your homosexual identity by casing Canary Wharf to plant a bomb. It sounds crazy, but I understand the logic you've described.
Yeah, I mean, disgustingly, it does make sense from that ideology's perspective. But it's...
So at what point did you start to think this really is mad and I need to actually reject it?
Okay. Going back to your previous question, it was, they're not just running away from their sexuality, but they're also running away from their doubts, from themselves. So they're trying to prove it to
fundamentalism is
themselves.
easy, I guess.
Exactly. Now, answering the question, when did I really start having proper doubts? This was kind of when I first started university. So this was around 2010. And I mean, I still remained a radical. But
Where were you at university?
I was at Queen Mary studying medicine.
In London?
Yeah, in London. And basically, I had those doubts, but I still remained radical for like 4 years. And then it was after that kind of 4-year period where I just thought, you know what, I'm becoming depressed. These doubts aren't going away, because I would push these doubts to the back of my mind. But I mean, they wouldn't go away. They were there. So I decided to confront them.
Just to pause for a second on that story. You apply to study medicine, to become a doctor, to heal people.
Yes.
While plotting bombing attacks in London.
Yes. That sounds extremely
Would
crazy.
you have actually helped to treat the victims of your own bombing? Had there been one?
That is a question I have not thought about. And I think I'll have to think about that before I do answer.
Take your time.
Yes, I would have, in some very cognitive dissonance way.
Okay.
Yeah, it's because at the same time, I have a duty to kind of protect people and to kind of save people, but at the same time, I have a duty towards, the way I thought it, a duty towards my religion. So it was kind of...
As I say, you are clever, and clever people can hold in their mind competing thoughts like that. It sounds ridiculous when I lay it out like that, but I could see how you could for a time have both thoughts. I'm going to be a doctor and save people. I'm going to be a terrorist and kill people. But at some point, the thoughts come together and you can't go on.
Exactly. It was like my mind was fractured and there were lots of tiny islands in my mind. And within each island, there were kind of completely disparate beliefs that were being held, that were contradictory. And it was these kinds of ideas. And it's really difficult to describe. But actually talking about being a doctor, one of the things that led to my de-radicalization is I thought, wait a minute, if Britain really is at war with Islam, if Britain really does hate Muslims, why on earth am I being funded to study medicine? And why on earth is Britain actually entrusting me with protecting its most vulnerable people? That didn't make sense to me. I pushed that doubt to the back of my mind, but then it caught up with me. And that was one of the reasons that led to my de-radicalization.
And was that a process, or was it you wake up on a Tuesday morning and...
Oh no. It was very much a process. Because I've always been very scientifically minded. So, one thing that had always been bothering me was the theory of evolution. Why does Islam, or the Islam that I was brought up in, why does it say evolution isn't true? So, one day all these doubts just kind of were in my head and I decided to confront them all. And the first thing I confronted was evolution. I looked at evolution, all the evidences for it, and I realized evolution was true. And then when I realized that, I had to change my religious views as it related to Adam and Eve, Adam and Hawa. So when I did that, that just kind of started off a kind of like a domino effect. So it was kind of like I changed my views on evolution, then I changed my views on jihad, then I changed my views on, and it just kept going on there. And it was kind of the science that actually initiated it all. And yeah, so that's how I actually became de-radicalized.
And then I have to ask, I wonder whether as part of that you then say, friends, I'm gay.
Yes, it was actually at the end of that de-radicalization process that I actually then came out to everyone. And when that happened, it caused the shockwave. I mean, I knew it would, instigate an effect, but not to such an extent.
A shockwave among your friends?
Among my friends, I mean, because I was well known in my community, because I used to be an imam in my local mosque. I was known as the religious guy.
There are not many gay imams.
Exactly. So, so it was a very kind of, people kind of got really shocked about it.
And have you seen your parents?
I have seen my parents a few times after they kind of kicked me out of the house or forced me out, but I haven't seen them in 8 months because the last time I did see them, it did not work well.
Because they just can't accept any of this?
They can't accept any of it.
Do they listen to you describing what you've described to me or not?
I mean, they'll listen to it, but they'll reject it. For example, my parents sincerely believe that I'm not gay. And the reason for that is that I'm not gay enough in their view. Apparently, I'm not, quote unquote effeminate, or as a child, I didn't, paint my nails, or like, that kind of like ridiculous kind of idea. They don't believe that I'm gay.
So how's life?
Well, it's been a very kind of like a tumultuous kind of change. But I mean, initially I didn't really process it, but a year after all this has happened, I think I'm finally beginning to process it and it's beginning to sink in, and I'm starting to deal with it emotionally. And right now it's, I've decided that I'm going to dedicate my life to kind of fighting this insidious, pernicious ideology of Islamism and, protecting and defending LGBT rights, especially as it relates to LGBT Muslims. So, I mean, things have changed a lot, especially with the work that I'm doing now. But
and you're campaigning against extremism through the Quilliam Foundation, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. I'm working closely with the Quilliam Foundation, and also in future I might be working with the government's de-radicalization program channel.
All right. Well, it's absolutely fascinating to speak to you. And I can tell you're still, working it all out. But thank you so much for your candor. Sohail Ahmed, who told his story to us on Radio 2.